Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all today to a very eventful presentation, one that we've been looking forward to, I would say, for many years. We have with us today Dr. Carmen Neustadter, soon to be Dr. Carmen Neustadter, a frequent feature of Microsoft Research over the last, I would say, what is it, 4.5 years. Carmen has been an intern in several groups at MSR over the last many years and is just now finishing his PhD with Saul Greenberg at the University of Calgary, and his work there, I think you will agree, is both very intriguing and also very highly aligned with much of the work that is taking place here at MSR. So with that, I hope you will join me in welcoming Carmen and listening attentively. So the clapping.
Thank you very much. So today, if there's one message I want to take or give to you and have you take away this morning, is this. That's okay.
Turn on your microphone. Yes. Is it on? Is the button up on the front?
No, it is.
Thank you.
Thanks. So the message I want to give to you today is really that studying the needs and practices of everyday people can benefit the design of collaborative technologies. Now, I'm sure for many people I'm really preaching to the choir with this, but I think it's a nice reminder that we can all take away and think about. I'm going to illustrate this message today by looking at three main things. I'm going to talk about some home-based video conferencing work that I did as a part of my master's thesis. I'm going to then talk about a portion of my PhD research on digital family calendar design. And then I'm going to do a quick Project Madness that highlights some additional projects I've worked on that really emphasize this same main theme. So we're going to start out by talking a little bit about the workplace and something called casual interaction. And to really see this, I'm going to show you a short video that highlights some main points. So this is a video of a camera set up at the end of a hallway, and I want you to watch and see how people interact throughout this hallway, how they stay aware of what people are up to. So as you see, as the people go down the hallway, they're actually glancing in open office doorways to check out who's around and who's available. And you're going to see this time and time again. So here a guy comes up the hallway, notice how he's glancing in. He's really gathering an awareness of who's around and if they're available for conversation. This type of awareness actually leads very nicely into interaction, as we see with this group of three women as they come up here. They check in the office, see somebody's in there available, and then they move into conversation with the people in the office. Again, same thing. This guy's coming up the hallway, checking the open office doorways, again gathering a sense of awareness. Now, my favorite part is this guy here. He looks in, checks that office. Now he's going to go see the person he wants to talk to, notices that the person's not there, and now he actually comes back for his second pick. Goes into the office, they interact, and he's going to come out very satisfied that now he's able to move on with his work. So a few things you saw in the video, how awareness of what others are up to and their availability actually leads into interaction, and research has shown this actually helps foster group collaboration. But of course there's a problem and there's a challenge. What happens when people are separated by distance? A real-world example here, my supervisor, Saul, he lives in Canmore, which is about an hour's drive from the city of Calgary where I go to university. Now, because of this long distance, Saul actually telecommutes 2 days a week from his home in Canmore. But because he's not in the same city as us, it's much more difficult for us to gather a sense of when Saul's available, when he's working, and then how we can communicate with him. So it actually poses a burden for us. And there are definitely tools then we can use to help overcome this distance barrier. On the left, we see an instant messaging system, which actually provides a fairly impoverished view of awareness, but it still can work, where you use availability states like online, away, and busy to decide if somebody's available right now, and then you can communicate with them. But often people don't set these, so they're not the most reliable. But on the right, we see actually a fairly rich way using a video stream or a video media space, where you can actually see in full fidelity what people are up to, much like you would in a face-to-face situation. The challenge, though, is privacy. And I'm going to play a Sony commercial here that really illustrates this nicely. Oh, there's no sound. No sound?
You pull that out, at least there'll be...
Okay, speaker sound. So definitely privacy is a huge concern. That was Sony's illustration of it. I have another example that's maybe a little closer to home. Real life scenario, Saul was working at home one day. We're using video to maintain awareness and collaboration. Saul's master bedroom was getting renovated, so he had to use his spare bedroom in place of it. And actually, this also doubles as his home office. So watch what happened one day when Saul was at home. So lucky for us, he noticed the camera, and it didn't proceed any further. There have been studies of techniques to try and mitigate these concerns. So video obfuscation is one that has been studied a lot. On the left, you see a blur filter. On the right, you see a pixelate filter. The idea is to mask some of the sensitive details while still providing a sense of awareness. So you can still see what happens, but maybe you can't necessarily see the specifics. This has been shown to be successful for workplace situations. But the question is, well, what about the telecommuting situation? Is it going to work in practice for those types of scenarios? So to understand this, the first thing we did was we recorded what we consider to be 5 example situations that could be accidentally captured while you're working at home. The top left here is just a fairly mundane situation. Somebody's just working at home. Everything's what you'd expect to see in the workplace. The top left, we see an example of somebody who's dressed appropriately for the home. And you could also imagine a scenario where you're wearing pajamas or something, but maybe not necessarily fine to be seeing if somebody's at their workplace, seeing it over a video stream. On the top right, we see a situation where a family member comes into the scene, doesn't realize the camera is capturing, and it gets broadcast in a fairly intimate situation. And then on the bottom left, we see somebody caught picking their nose. So you could maybe catch this in the workplace if you happen to, but it's probably not going to be up close and as crude as this over the video stream. And then the bottom right, we have basically a replica of the Saul situation where somebody completely forgets the camera's capturing and disrobes in front of it, and the colleagues are then seeing this at the workplace. And I'm sure you can imagine yourself being caught in similar situations. It could be quite privacy intrusive. We then took these scenes and we blurred them at 10 different levels of filtration. You see 9 here. The 10th is really just the unfiltered scene. And we wanted to see, are there any levels of filtration that can mask the sensitive details in the scene while still providing a sense of awareness? So is there a balance between them? And to do this, we ran a controlled study. This portion, the study was done in collaboration with Michael Boyle, who was a PhD student at the University of Calgary at the time, and of course my advisor, Saul Greenberg. We had 20 participants, 10 male, 10 female. They viewed all of the scenes, all of the 5 scenes at each of our 10 blur levels. Male participants saw the scene with a male actor as the main actor, and females saw a scene with a female actress as the main actress in the scene. And we asked them to imagine that the person in the scene was their close working colleague at the office, that they had a strong relationship with and a real need to maintain an awareness of. And then we asked them some privacy and awareness questions about it. For awareness, we said, well, at what blur level can you first identify things like the person's activity, who is actually in the scene, so the person, their appearance, what were they wearing, and then their availability. Is now a good time to move into interaction with them? This graph shows the mean blur level that was chosen for awareness. So this is the first point at which they could deduce awareness cues. So for example, for the working scene we see on the left here, at around blur levels between 3 through 5, they're first able to deduce somebody's activity, then who is in the scene, then their appearance and their availability. So all around blur level 3 there. And we see actually for all the scenes, it's a fairly common theme. Between blur levels 3 and 5, they can first figure out what's going on in the scene. They started watching the scenes from the most blurry to the least blurry, and this is the first point they could deduce the information. And I should say, we did some statistical testing on this, and there's actually no significant differences between the types of awareness information, between the 4 colored bars, and then also between the different scenes. There was no differences. We then asked them about privacy. Well, how threatening to privacy is each blur level to the person in the scene, the telecommuter? And then imagine yourself in this situation on video. What blur level would you choose for your colleagues to see you? How comfortable would you be with that? This graph here shows the privacy threat to the telecommuter. So the different blur levels are along the bottom. And we see that actually for all 5 scenes, it starts out with very low privacy threat, only 1 or 2 on a 5-point Likert scale. But then as the blur level reduces, we actually see the privacy threat actually increase fairly drastically for especially the top 2 scenes, the changing and the kissing scene, and then not much for just the mundane working scene, which is on the bottom. Statistical testing actually allowed us to group these into 3 types of privacy threat. The top 2 scenes were the most privacy threat, and there was no significant differences between them. No differences between the 2 middle scenes, but then there were differences between the bottom and the middle and the middle and the top scenes. So kind of 3 groupings. Yeah?
Was there sort of some threshold at which people didn't want to have video at all, or is it just, it's 3, like, for, I turn the camera off? Did you have to get a sense of that?
We actually asked them.
Do you have a sense of at which point would the person sort of turn the camera on the privacy threat?
Yeah, we asked them as part of a separate question, is there a point at which you'd want the camera off? And for some participants, for the changing and kissing scene, they said, absolutely, I won't even want to pick a blur level. I just want the camera off. For other people, though, they were mostly satisfied with a fairly filtered scene. I think I have a graph on the next slide to show that. So yeah, so the blur level that they picked, if they were the person in the scene, so for the working scene, we see they actually pick a fairly unfiltered level, around blur level 7. And then for the other scenes, they're actually picking a much more filtered scene. And for changing and kissing, it was actually the most filtered that they had. And then some people did opt to say, I actually do want to just turn the camera off at that point. We did statistical testing. There was no differences between male and female responses. But we did find we could group the scenes basically the same as the privacy threat. There were no differences in the blur level chosen between kissing and changing, but they were different than the ones chosen for the middle 2 scenes and different from the working scene.
Was there a blur level 0, or is that just kind of an artifact of your graph?
So blur level 0 we considered turning off the camera. Yeah. So taken together, we can see several things. So for awareness, blur levels 3, 4, and 5 could provide awareness cues, so you could figure out what was going on in the scene if the person was available. For privacy, for all of the scenes, it was really only blur levels 1 and 2 that could protect the privacy of the telecommuter. So we actually found there was no overlap in these blur levels. So there's not a way that we could have a blur level that would balance both privacy and awareness needs. So the key findings were really that people didn't actually trust this type of obfuscation technique because they didn't trust the fact that if the camera was facing them, the appropriate blur level would be transmitted to their colleague. Often people would say, well, even if the camera is off and it's facing me, I still think it's actually capturing me and broadcasting me in full fidelity. People really wanted more control over the what this technique could do. They wanted maybe certain blur levels for certain situations, other blur levels for another situation, maybe sometimes having the camera off. And they told us that really this doesn't recognize the context of the situation. It doesn't know what's being presented before it and can't adapt based on that. So given that this technique didn't work, we turned to a way to try and provide a smarter environment. Yeah?
The way that I read your first graph was that availability is equivalent to identifying. That is, since everything came out the same, that says seeing what someone's doing is exactly the same as knowing whether you can talk to them. Is that?
Sort of. So in talking with the participants and seeing what they said, determining if somebody was available was a number of things. Determining if the person was actually in the scene, like you're saying, what their activity was doing, and then also trying to determine if, even if they're doing an activity, do they look like they're busy or not? So what type of expression do they have? Do they look like they're concentrating or not? So our next approach, yeah, you have a question?
Non-video enabled indicators of availability and busyness.
No, so all that they were using to determine availability was the video channel itself, and what they could see from that. Yeah. So our next approach then, given that that didn't work, we wanted to find a way to better interpret the context of the situation. So we actually, through an iterative design process, designed a context-aware home media space, where we took physical sensors and widgets called fidgets to prototype some of our ideas to how we could regulate it and just figure out maybe how many people are in the room, what's the activity of the person, and then use that to regulate privacy. And I'm going to show you a short video that illustrates some of the key concepts that we came up with and tried out.
In our design, we provide users with lightweight and transparent privacy regulation. Privacy can be controlled through explicit and implicit means, and the state of the system is easily discernible at any time through visual and audio feedback. Our home media space is set up in a spare bedroom home office of a telecommuter and is specific to our room layout, yet the ideas can be applied to many different settings. The graphical user interface provides users with a mirror view of their captured video and controls to adjust the capturing state and video fidelity. Our home media space contains several elements that arise from our design philosophy. The camera can be in one of three states: play, pause, or stop. In the play state, the camera is capturing and broadcasting video to colleagues. In the pause state, the camera no longer captures video, yet other awareness information is broadcast, like the number of people in the room and a still image of the telecommuter. In the stop state, the camera no longer captures video, and only an explicit act will cause the camera to begin capturing. The camera, mounted on a rotating motor, is placed near the door and can capture any region of the room except the doorway, so activities outside of the room are not visible. The video fidelity can be altered by adjusting the level of blur filtration used, the frame rate, or the frame size. Users can use graphical controls or dedicated physical sliders. Gesture-activated blocking allows users to easily turn off the camera by simply blocking it with a hand gesture. We detect this using a proximity sensor placed on top of the camera. Gesture-activated voice provides users with a lightweight control to enable an optional audio link. Moving one's hand over the microphone enables the link, and moving one's hand away disables the link. We detect this with a light sensor on the base of the microphone. An easy off button gives users another simple way to quickly and easily turn off the camera. We detect this explicit action with a capacitive sensor. We know if the telecommuter is present at the computer by detecting the implicit act of someone sitting down or standing up from the computer, and using an RFID reader and tag to identify the person as the telecommuter. We know if people other than the telecommuter are in the room using an infrared motion sensor by the door that detects the implicit act of people entering and leaving the room.
So that was the design that we came up with. We actually didn't have a chance to formally evaluate it as part of this project, but it was informally used for about a month by myself as I developed it, where my colleagues at the University of Calgary could see my video, and I would adjust privacy regulations within my home office. We found the techniques that worked the best for regulating privacy were the ones that focused on the camera, because it really was the key source of information capture. So things like blocking the camera really worked well, as opposed to other things which were away from it, like the physical controls and so on. This concludes the first project for the talk, where again I want to highlight the message that studying the needs and practices of everyday people can benefit the design of collaborative technologies. And you saw this through the design of a home media space, where first we looked at one technique, video blurring, to see how it would work for balancing privacy and awareness. We found it wouldn't work, so we moved to more smarter context-based techniques to really mitigate some of the concerns, like the video you saw there. Yeah?
Did you look at other approaches than video? Video obviously is great for when you actually want to have an interaction,
Yes.
but when you just are trying to determine the availability, it, sort of by definition gives too much information, and so you're having to kind of jump through hoops to give the right information. Whereas, if the person's there, what they're doing can be kind of extracted into some kind of presence, reading that is more sophisticated than what you have today with, online, offline, etc.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're absolutely right. What we could try as alternatives, but we didn't do, is try to use some type of sensing to maybe more accurately present things like availability states. I think that would be probably a viable approach. It wasn't something we looked at because we wanted to first explore kind of how to actually replicate the rich cues that people are used to seeing. Yeah. So I'm now going to move into the second part of the talk, looking at digital family calendar design, which forms a large portion of my PhD research. So families face many coordination challenges on an everyday basis. There's, wrong direction. There's daycare you need to figure out and plan. There's school activities, extracurricular things like ballet, soccer, doctor's appointments, rides to all these various activities. You even have your work on top of this that sometimes you need to intermix amongst your family and home life. And as I'm finding out, once you have kids, it's definitely more challenging. That's a shot of my 12-week-old son. And families often use a fairly complex system to manage their information, maybe involving a paper calendar, an archive of past calendars, notices from soccer, sports, school activities, places to stick these, maybe around the fridge, day timer they might carry with them, maybe even a work calendar contains some family activities. What we've found out is that one of the most important parts of this complex system is the family calendar. In fact, one mom told me, the family calendar is extremely important. We're involved in so many different events, I have to be able to map it out, or we would forget places, dates, and times. A dad this time told me, when you have kids in school, you have to have a schedule. There's just too much. You can't plan anything without looking at the calendar. So very crucial piece of the family coordination. Many families use paper calendars and do receive benefits from them. They're easy to use. You just grab them and write on them. They are mobile. You can take that piece of paper really wherever you want to. You can personalize them using your own handwriting, using color and other annotations. And they also create an instant archive of your family's activities that you can go and reflect on. But they do have their limitations. Your paper calendar really is only available in one location at any given time. You could use multiple calendars, but then you have the challenge of trying to synchronize them, which can be actually very time-consuming. And they can get messy. It's paper. You're writing on them. You cross things out and so on. Why go digital? Well, we can definitely overcome some of the disadvantages of paper. You could imagine one of the main benefits would be to have access to your family calendar in many different locations. Being able to access it from home, maybe also from work, or maybe even while you're mobile and on the go. But of course, digital calendars already do this. They do exist. We have your work calendar, which you probably all use, I'm sure. Your maybe an online calendar like MSN or Google and so on. Maybe even one designed more specifically to meet family needs. You might even carry a digital organizer to help you plan family events. But what I argue is actually these are not really designed to meet the needs of families and actually offer families a fairly impoverished way to coordinate activities. And I'm going to illustrate this to you. Our research goal then was really to understand how to design a digital family calendar that, one, could fit within the routines of families so they can still use some of the things that benefit them currently in their routines, but then also extend routines to overcome their challenges. So we did a study of family calendars and family calendar routines. This work was done in collaboration with AJ Brush and also my advisor Saul. We looked at 44 middle-class families, 22 from Calgary and 22 from the Seattle area. that had a variety of compositions in terms of number of children, their ages, and a mix of ethnic backgrounds. We used contextual interviews where we either went into their home or had them bring to us any coordination artifacts they might use, like their paper calendar, maybe printouts of a work calendar, lists, and then anything else they found they used for family coordination. And we discussed these artifacts and how they use them, what they're putting on them, and so on. We analyzed several things. We had our interview notes. We also had audio recordings from the interviews that we looked at. And then we had the calendars themselves and their content. And we used some fairly standard techniques coming from the social sciences, open coding, as well as affinity diagramming. I'm going to look at three main findings from this study. Calendars that families use, the steps they take to schedule and coordinate with them, and then the way they provide additional meaning to their calendars through annotations and augmentations. So first, how many calendars were families actually using? This graph shows the number of calendars along the bottom. So we see that around 30% of families are using actually only one calendar. But a larger majority, 70% of families, are actually using more than one calendar. And if we look at the types of calendar they're using, we can actually find 6 different styles. 3 paper styles of calendars along the top, and then 3 digital styles along the bottom. We've actually found, though, a much more interesting way of looking at these calendars is understanding why they're using them and for what purposes, which has created a typology of calendars. Yeah?
Can you count the number of calendars they use? Do you distinguish between what they use for shared work or, I use calendar at work, which I keep separate from stuff that I do at home.
Yeah.
Do you count, would you count me as 2 or 1?
So we counted any calendar they used for family coordination. So if you had one at work that basically didn't contain family activities, that wouldn't be included. Yeah. So we developed a typology of calendars that really looks at how calendars are being used by families and groups them according to that usage. And we have 6: a public awareness calendar, a personal work, personal mobile, personal children's, planning and reference, and a tasks and chores calendar. I'm going to talk about these and the way they use them. So first, a public awareness calendar. The goal of these calendars is really to provide family awareness, to allow other family members understand what the family's activities are. Because of this, they're typically placed in a public location of the home where family members can easily see them. And we found that over 80% of our families used a public awareness calendar as their primary family calendar, so the main calendar for the family's routine. There's 2 examples on the right, blown up. So the first one we see is a family who places their paper calendar on the fridge door. This way they can quickly walk by and see it. All family members can see it. It's in a public location right in their kitchen. This is another family's. Again, it's placed in the kitchen. This time, though, it's above another important resource, which is the phone. Because a lot of times you'll get a phone call about something to plan or schedule, and you'll then put that onto your calendar. So it's right nearby. The second type is a personal work calendar. The goal of these is really to store your work events, but we found that they actually store some family events, the family activities that affect your work schedule. So for example, if you need to leave work today at 3 to drive a child to a doctor's appointment, that would probably make it onto your work calendar. But it differs a little bit between people. These either reside at work naturally or sometimes move between work or home if you have it on a laptop or a mobile device. Half of our families use the personal work calendar as part of their family coordination routine. 11% use it as a primary calendar for their family. And you see several examples on the right, typical work calendars that you might use. The next type is a personal mobile calendar. This provides calendar access while you're out and about. And really then it's mobile with one person. So different from our work calendar in that this is for personal use, and it's also mobile. Just under a quarter of families use one of these as part of their coordination routine. 9% of families actually use this as their primary family calendar. Now, the challenge with using a personal mobile calendar as the primary family calendar is because it's with one person only, other family members can't see what activities the family has. So it can actually lead to coordination challenges. And you see several examples on the right. The top is just a date timer that you might carry with you. In the middle, we actually have an online calendar where this mom would check it frequently from different locations. And then the bottom one is just a paper calendar, usually hung on the wall, but this mom actually carried it around with her, using it as a personal mobile calendar. The next type is a personal children's calendar. The goal of these is really to teach children and make them aware of the family's activities and understanding how their activities fit within the families itself. They're often located naturally in a child's room. 11% of our families use one of these as part of their coordination routine, and they're always used in a secondary role. The examples on the right I actually really love. This mom, what she would do at the beginning of each month is actually create one of these calendars for each of her children, where they could stick on the number for the day, and she would also use little symbols so they could understand what the family's activities were even before they could actually read. Then we have a planning and reference calendar. This either serves one of two purposes. It either acts as a draft space to plan out events or as a way to check out dates. So for example, the top one here, it's a little hard to read from the picture, but the mom writes everything on this calendar in pencil. And then when things are finalized, she'll copy that information onto her family's public awareness calendar that's hanging in the kitchen so they can all see. But only she sees this planning calendar. The bottom calendar, this mom likes to see an at-a-glance of the entire year. So she can look ahead to see the summer months to figure out what days would be good to go on a family vacation, which weekends. So it's really to check out dates ahead of time. Their location really is conducive to planning, so where you might plan, maybe it's in the kitchen, maybe it's in the home office. 11% of our families use one of these calendars as part of their routine, and it was always in a secondary role. And then the final type is a tasks and chores calendar. The goal of these is really to record tasks and chores. Some people put these in their other calendars, but some families use a special dedicated calendar just for tasks and chores. The location of these is really conducive to planning or reminding, so you might, again, have it in your kitchen if that's where you plan, or you might stick it somewhere where it can act as a visual reminder of the tasks that you need to get done. 7% of our families used one of these, and again, they're always in a secondary role. And I'm going to show you the two images on the right, quite large, because I really like them. So first, this is one mom's housework schedule. She would make it every 2 weeks, so she could kind of schedule out when she was going to clean things so she didn't have to do everything on one particular day. And then she also had a meal planning calendar. She was very organized. At the beginning of each month, she would go and figure out for every weekday what the family was going to eat for dinner. And then the week before, she would buy all the groceries on the weekend. And you'll notice it only goes Monday to Friday. Well, what about the weekends? Are they not eating? No, that, she said, was when she gets to go out to eat and doesn't have to cook for the family. The next thing we looked at was what are the processes families are using to actually schedule and coordinate with these calendars. So definitely scheduling. We found it kind of comes in three main ways. There's often, first, a batch update. This happens when you get maybe a notice from school or a new school year begins, and you copy a large amount of events onto the calendar all at once, so in a big batch. Sometimes it even happens at the beginning of a calendar year. Maybe you copy all of the birthdays onto your new calendar. The second one then is continuous updates. These happen throughout a day. Sometimes you're at home, you need to schedule something. Maybe you're out of the home and you need to schedule something like, in the bottom example, you're at the doctor's and need to schedule a follow-up appointment. So the point is that updates to the calendar happen throughout the day, regardless of where you are. And then calendars often need to be synchronized. We saw over 70% of families use more than one calendar, and they need to copy and move events between them so they don't end up double booking, so that all of the relevant calendar events are in the relevant locations on the relevant calendars. Families then use the knowledge on the calendar to coordinate, to figure out who's going to be responsible for which activities. And this is really done through awareness of the calendar. So either checking the calendar to see its contents, or by having other people remind family members of what's going on. Using this knowledge then to discuss through face-to-face interaction, like you see in the top image, or maybe over the phone if somebody's at work and somebody's at home. As opposed to the workplace where people are often assigned to events ahead of time. You receive a meeting request, you pick off who you want to go to the meeting. This is not how family coordination actually works. They don't decide this information ahead of time, it's actually discussed at a later point. Sometimes it's not even needed to be discussed because it comprises tacit knowledge. Family members just know who's going to be responsible for certain activities. Within these processes, we found there are really two roles for family coordination. On the left, we have the primary scheduler. This is the person who's most responsible for maintaining the calendar, updating it, checking it, reminding other people about the activities. And in our families, 93% of these was a woman, the female head of the household. The other role is of secondary schedulers. These are the other family members who maybe add stuff to the calendar, check it, get told about its contents. But their role actually varies somewhat, which allows us to create 3 different types of families, ranging from low family involvement to high family involvement. So on the left, we have the monocentric family, where really the calendar routine revolves around one person. This is the primary scheduler. This is the only person in the family that's really updating and checking the calendar. And because of that, this person tells other people about the activities on it. And 39% of our families fit this mold. You could also think of this as the momocentric family. The next family type is the pericentric family. So it's a near-centered family where the primary scheduler still does most of the updates and checking of the calendar, but then other family members are infrequently adding to the calendar. So they're starting to engage, but it's still infrequent. And 27% fit this mold. And then the final type is a polycentric family where many people are becoming involved in the calendar routine. All family members, or most of them, are updating and checking the calendar, so it has high family involvement. We've also looked at the contents of the family calendar, looking at the types of events they place on them, how many events, and so on. I'm going to look at one specific part, though, looking at the annotations, because I think it's often the most interesting. So we found there are several ways that families annotate their calendar. First, through colors and highlights, trying to make important information stand out so they can quickly glance at the calendar and see what's on it, so providing at-a-glance awareness. In this example, we see the families actually using highlights quite a bit. In fact, all of the highlighted blue days are when the dad works. He's a firefighter. He works 4 days on, 4 days off, so you can actually see the pattern. So without even writing anything on the calendar, the family can quickly glance at it and see when dad works. We also found families often augment their calendars with extra information. This is the stuff that goes along with the calendar events but can't really get written on the calendar. Maybe there's not enough space, maybe it's on other pieces of paper. Families will often place it around the calendar so it's ready at hand, so you can quickly grab it when they need to. As you see in this case here, there's some notices and phone numbers around it. Another mom created something very interesting. It was basically a binder which she called the Book of Life. This is where they would stick all the extra stuff in for each family member, and then she would place it in the kitchen where all family members knew it was and they could look when they needed it. Another mom would just take the pieces of paper and basically shove them up in the calendar between the folds of the 2 months. So it was right there again, ready at hand when she would need it. When she left the house, though, what did she do with it? Well, she actually grabbed all those pieces of paper and would shove them in her purse, which she called the purse file, and she would carry it with her. And then the last annotation I'm going to talk about is symbols. We saw the top example earlier with the children's calendar, really trying to replace words with a symbol of what's going to happen. So for example, the top row has a dog in the top left corner of each date. This is a reminder for the kids to feed the neighbor's dog, which they're dog sitting that week. The balloon on the first that says mom in it is a reminder it's mom's birthday. On the bottom picture, this family is using stickers as a way to symbolize events, again, so the family can quickly glance at the calendar and see what is happening and what's important. So at this point, we have a very rich understanding of the way families use calendars and coordinate based on that, which actually presents several lessons that we can use to understand and how to design digital family calendars better. First, we saw families often need a calendar that's always on and publicly located in the home in the form of a public awareness calendar. So all family members can see what activities they have and check the calendar and then coordinate based on that. We also saw the importance of calendar ubiquity, having the calendar accessible from lots of different locations. At work, maybe in the form of a personal work calendar, while mobile, personal mobile calendars, and then in multiple home locations, having a children's calendar, a tasks and chores calendar, a reference calendar, and so on. And then through annotations, providing at-a-glance awareness of calendar content, so family members can quickly see what's on the calendar just by glancing at it. We've taken these lessons for design then and developed our own digital family calendar that we call Link. And I'm going to show you a short video that highlights some of its usage and its design. We designed it through a participatory design approach, moving from sketches, paper prototypes, all the way to a digital design. And here's the video.
Link is an always-on information appliance prototyped using a tablet PC that can be placed in high-traffic locations in the home like the kitchen. Link was designed to be very simple to use. If I want to schedule a dinner with Susan's family, all I have to do is write on a sticky note and then drag the note onto the calendar where it automatically resizes to fit in a day. If a conflict develops, the event can be easily rescheduled to another day just by dragging it. The interaction in Link is also very flexible. Much like paper calendars, Link doesn't restrict the way you write an event down or what information you include. You can even draw pictures. Users can pick ink and note colors to personalize the calendar. This family uses color to quickly identify who has an event. For example, Dawn's events are always green. Other families use color to highlight important events or different types of activities. One of the obvious benefits of a digital calendar is to make calendar information accessible anywhere. Link can run on any desktop PC, at home, or even at work, where all clients synchronize with the server. A Link screensaver ensures the calendar is visible on desktop computers when they are not being used. Link Web is available in any web browser so that family members can see the calendar when they are unable to install the Link client. Families also need to check the calendar while mobile. In this case, they can run Link Mobile on a smartphone and display images of the family calendar. Users can pan and zoom to look at the events.
So that was the final system that was implemented. Our next step in the project was to understand how it would actually be used by families in their own real-world setting. So we had a field trials of Link, which involved 4 families over a period of 4 weeks. 2 were from Seattle and 2 were from Calgary. And they used Link as their primary family calendar, so in replacement of a paper one they might have used or a digital system that they were already employed. We used diaries to have them record notes and thoughts about their calendar usage throughout the week, and then we interviewed them at the end of each week. So we had 4 families. We nicknamed them the Leonard family, the Isaacs, the Newmans, and the Chambers. So L-I-N-C for Link. And they actually did use and adopt Link throughout the 4 weeks. And here's snapshots of each family's calendar. But the interesting thing for us was the ways in which they adopted and the things they found most beneficial or the things that actually limited their routines. And I'm going to highlight a few of those. So first, for the Leonard family, having a calendar that was publicly accessible was very important. In fact, Leonard Dad said, "It makes me more interested in paying attention to the home calendar. I never really accessed the AOL calendar much," which was the calendar they used before. Link was something I could access easily without spending a whole bunch of time looking for it. It was very much more visible. For the Chambers, having a mobile location in the home was very valuable. Chambers' mom told us, "Honestly, if I didn't have the tablet, I know I wouldn't use it because it'd be on my computer in the other room, and why would I go in there? I'm not going to go into the other room to check it because I have kids in here. Mobility is very important. That's why I like the wireless and the tablet." Link was also designed as an always-on calendar, but this actually received somewhat mixed reviews. On one hand, some families really enjoyed that it was walk up and use like their paper calendar. And this was actually illustrated through a design flaw where for the Newman family, at nighttime, because Link was always on, it would produce this blue-purple glow and haze throughout their kitchen with the lights all off. Unfortunately, though, their master bedroom was just around the corner from the kitchen, and they could actually see this blue glow. And the first night they wondered, what is that blue glow? You know, are the aliens coming in or what? Of course, it was Link. So, you know, they complained and told me about the problem, and I said, well, let's try this. Let's have the display turn off after 15 minutes of inactivity, so just using the power management features. This worked great at nighttime. They were able to sleep fine, but the challenge came during the day. For Newman Dad, he really liked that how he could walk up and just glance at the calendar, but when it would turn off every 15 minutes, this was no longer possible. He'd have to walk by, grab the stylus, tap the screen, wait 3 seconds, and then he could see what was on the calendar before he left the home. This was too much for him, though, and in fact, he reverted back for a few days to actually using his paper calendar, which was still hung up on the way out of the house. So for him, walk up and use was crucial. But for some other families, and even his wife, a multi-purpose device was seen to be beneficial. So they enjoyed being able to use the calendar and see it always on, but they thought it would be beneficial to actually be able to see other applications that were calendar related. So to check email, which may contain some calendar events, or to go to specific web pages, maybe has more info about the soccer game or other sports activities. So really we understand now that we need to balance this need for always on with accessing some calendar related applications. At a glance awareness using ink and colors was actually the most popular feature of the calendar for all of the families. Chambers' dad said, I just come down in the morning, I look, if there's no colors on there, I don't worry about the day. If there's a color on there, I know. So he could quickly see from the calendar colors if he had activities. Leonard Mom says, I like the colors, I liked how you could draw, it really does look a lot more fun. And even found that her children were beginning to draw on the calendar. Work access for the family calendar was also beneficial. Isaac's dad said, I think what works well is that I can pull it up on my work computer. That was definitely a nice thing. In reply, Isaac's mom said, it pulled you into being part of the routine a bit more. So in fact, it increased family involvement for this family. Yeah?
On that last page where you said the kids were beginning to draw on it,
Yeah.
was that draw on it contribute to events act meaningfully, or was that draw on it, ooh, look, the stickies move?
So I think a little of both, adding things that they thought were important, maybe a school activity, but then also doing some fun things, which we also saw in other families as well.
But they were doing generally calendars, semantically meaningful things, as opposed to, hey, look, it's another drawing surface, it's like drawing on the wall, except, digital.
Yeah, there's definitely some calendar meaningful things, yeah. We also found works access was a bit limiting, especially for Chambers' dad. He said that he really wanted to integrate the family calendar with his iPad calendar that he just got the month before. At this point, though, Link was really its own calendar application. So we see next steps that we really need to integrate it with other existing calendar solutions. Mobile access also received somewhat mixed reviews. For Isaac's mom, she said, I'm going to need something bigger when outside the home. I've seen those PDAs, but I'm not sure about the size. I'm used to carrying binders, but I'm thinking about the grocery store. I'm not sure I want to carry a tablet. If I have a PTA meeting, I'd take it. So there's a few things coming out of this. Really, we now understand we need to have a flexible form factor for mobile devices. Maybe some families would benefit from a mobile phone. Maybe some other families do want a PDA. Or there's the PTA meeting when something larger might be suitable. We also recognize, though, that maybe you don't always need calendar access when you're out and about. There are some situations, like the grocery store, where you probably don't need to schedule events. But other times you might know ahead of time you're going to, like going to the doctor's appointment, and then you could take something with you. Multiple home locations was also very important, especially for Isaac's mom. She said, having Link upstairs also was terrific because if things came in email, I could modify them right away. I think, if anything, multiple locations helped enhance our routine because I'm in different locations. I didn't have to scramble and go and find that paper calendar, which may not always be in the place I thought. So for her, having Link upstairs, downstairs was very crucial to her routine. Overall, then, we see several key lessons coming from these field trials. First, the paper-like attributes of Link did in fact let families fit the calendar within their own routines. They could utilize their own handwriting, they could write on it as they used to, use colors to reflect their existing strategies, so it was very beneficial. But then the way we extended this through calendar ubiquity actually did increase family involvement for some families, where more family members were beginning to check the calendar and become part of the routine because they could access the calendar from lots of different locations. So this concludes the second part of the talk. And again, I want to return back to my message that studying the needs and practices of everyday people can benefit the design of collaborative technologies. We started this project by building a very rich understanding of the way families use calendars already, applying this knowledge to design, and then following through with evaluations of our system in a real-world context and real-world usage. Now, finally, I just want to do a quick project madness that illustrates some of the main theme again, using some additional projects. So first, my first internship on MSR, I had a chance to work with Gina Vanolia, where we were looking at understanding how to display email conversations within an email system, trying to group messages you see on the right here, both temporally as well as showing the reply structure in an email conversation. We did this through an iterative design process, as well as using some usability studies with actual end users. I had a chance to, with a group of individuals from the Community Technologies group, look very closely at email triage, where we actually went through contextual interviews with high-volume email users to understand how they're really triaging their email, what practices they're using, and where we could enhance these routines. That led to a tool called Snarf, where you could essentially sort your email correspondence based on social metrics to hopefully bring the important stuff in your email to the forefront. I've also had a chance to do some mentorship work where I worked with a student at the University of Calgary, master's student Anthony Tang, where his project was really to try and understand how we can support distributed teams of individuals working together over a shared visual surface. So we worked on building some studies together, which eventually led to the system you're going to see here.
Collaboration in visual workspaces is common for brainstorming, designing, and presentation tasks. In the physical world, visual workspaces support collaboration by providing immediate background activity, conversation, and gestures. If virtual workspaces are to succeed in augmenting this collaboration, we need to ensure their design still affords easy collaboration. Video arts is a video-based embodiment technique for groupware that extracts the images of collaborators as they work over a shared visual workspace. These images are sent to remote workstations where they are placed in the virtual workspace, mimicking their location in the physical workspace. Video arts is a natural mechanism for interacting with remote collaborators in a shared visual workspace that provides natural embodiments that enable the observation of workspace activity, provides a natural means for gesturing, and grounds conversation in the visual physicality of the body.
I've also done some additional work in the home to understand how families use different locations in the home to provide rich understanding of the information placed there. This was done in collaboration with Catherine Elliott, a master's student, again, at the University of Calgary. So you can imagine, you've probably done this yourself, you placed notes, like you see on that TV there, in specific locations that you know other family members will see. This mom actually stuck notes for her son right on the TV because she knew when he came home from school, that's the first place he looks. Or you might stick DVDs that need to go back to the video store on your stairs right by the exit to your home, so you'll see them. It may not be safe because you could slip on them, but you'll definitely notice. We studied these locations and really came up with a framework to understand how they're being used. And we found that these locations provide the information in them with knowledge of time, how urgent is something, ownership, is this note for a particular family member, or is it maybe more public for all of the family? And we found the locations can also provide awareness. For example, seeing keys on a key rack can sometimes tell you who's at home or not if people are driving. We use this knowledge to design a location-based messaging system for the home, which I'll show you here.
Sticky Spots is a location-based messaging system for the home that seeks to extend its natural use of location. It is designed to allow people to create and place digital notes much like they would in lives. Sticky Spots allows users to create virtual sticky note messages and to send them to various locations in their home using a network of displays. These displays will be placed in locations important to the household as message systems. They can include existing TVs and monitors, along with new displays that can be integrated into the home, such as tablets or altered mobile PCs. To create a note, touch the note icon. A new note appears and can be written on. Next, you select the location where you want the note to be displayed and hit send. You can have it go to any one or more of the displays connected to the central server.
So that concludes the third portion of the talk. And again, the message that studying the needs and practices of everyday people can benefit the design of collaborative technologies. And you've seen this illustrated through many different examples. So thank you very much for your attention. I'd be happy to take on any questions you might have. Yes.
A very nice talk, and
Thanks.
I agree with the principles that you're talking about there, but what about from the other extent where the topic that you're interested in is so new to the family that studying their everyday actions isn't going to help that much. So it's something that they have never done or doesn't relate to their current practices. How would you go about exploring a piece of technology like that?
I think that's a very good point. I think you could still learn a lot about what you may want to do for that technology by looking at what they do now. Because I think in some way it's going to benefit some type of existing process that they're doing in some way or another. It may actually change it a bit. So I think having that rich understanding to begin with is still a good idea.
So the calendars that you looked at in the link thing,
Yes.
did all of them have kids? Did the families all have kids? Does it matter?
So all the families did have children. We specifically looked at families with children because some other studies have actually shown that family coordination is much more challenging for families with children. So I think if you're going to be able to design a digital family calendar, that's really the most difficult, I guess, target population to hit because they will have the most challenges. Families who don't have children may have a lesser need for a shared calendar. Many families we talked to actually said, before we had kids, we each had our own calendar, but once we had children, we actually had to have something that was publicly accessible. Yeah.
So regarding the security or access to the information on there, it sounds like there was a couple of scenarios. One is, I think, was mentioned here where a kid might accidentally move stuff around.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you considered or if that was part of your study. And then secondly, either surprises or, like surprise party for mom or something. There might be other areas where you want to explicitly deny access.
Yeah.
Consider that or...
So in answer to your first question, in one of the early studies that we ran, one mom actually said to us, well, if the calendar is digital and it's available in different locations, there's more chance that my kids are going to change something on the calendar on me and I may not even know about it. So which caused us to look more at presenting change awareness so that family members could see what the last changes were to the calendar, understand when they were done, who did them, and then could adjust the calendar as needed. So we definitely tried to incorporate that into the design. The other question about having maybe certain events you definitely want hidden, I think it definitely arises, and probably there would just be a level of kind of social protocol that maybe they wouldn't end up on the calendar. They'd still be kept secret from certain family individuals. Because we found it was very important that the family have a shared calendar for a large majority of events. I'm just going to hit back here first.
In the first section, you talked about using motion to detect when the video was working.
Yeah.
But then when it came to the calendar, it seemed that you chose a time-based turn on, turn off. And I wondered if that was just sort of because it would be difficult to use motion, or had...
No, you're absolutely right. And very simply, we could have had a motion sensor that would turn on the display when somebody would walk by it and so on, but it wasn't something that we actually did with the design. Unfortunately not. But you're absolutely right, yeah.
Just a quick follow-up to the previous one. You mentioned that you kept a history of who changed things and what. If something was done on a centralized calendar in the kitchen, you didn't have any real notion of who made the changes, or because there's no login mechanism, was there?
No. There's actually, you're right. So we didn't know necessarily who made the change, but based on the time or the type of event, it's often easy to predict or figure out who actually made the change, but we couldn't explicitly know for sure. Yeah. And this is often still one of the drawbacks of a paper calendar, too.
Handwriting is usually used as a...
Yeah, so handwriting is definitely good so you can know who's added events, but knowing who's moved them or who's deleted them is more challenging. Yeah. But in terms of handwriting, families actually told us it was very beneficial to be able to use their own handwriting because they could identify who was adding events. Yeah.
You mentioned that there were like 3 different ways people added events to calendars, and that there was batch and continual.
Yeah.
Did you provide a batch way to add to the link calendars?
Nothing explicit, because with the batch, basically they have to transfer events from maybe a paper source right into the calendar. Certainly as it becomes more prevalent that schools and teams send out some type of electronic calendar, then I think what would be good is definitely incorporating into like Lync or another digital family calendar ways to automatically import those. But because the families were still often just using paper notices and whatnot, we didn't have any way to actually support a batch.
And nothing that would support recurrence of this.
Oh, yeah, so we absolutely supported a couple recurrence models. One where they could just tap on calendar days to add an event to multiple days, going under the assumption that often a lot of recurring family events don't maybe follow a specific pattern. You might have a soccer game on Saturday, Thursday, Friday, and so on. And then we also supported kind of the typical pattern you see in Outlook, like every week and so on. Yeah?
Since you just had a child, I just
Yeah.
have kind of a personal question to you.
Sure.
Do you use the little calendar in your family? And just
Yeah.
as having your own child,
Yeah.
coordinating this other stuff?
Yeah. So I don't. I would probably say for maybe IP technical reasons I can't use it at home. But when I was working on it, I did get to try it out for. I think we did kind of a pilot of it on our own families for about a month or so. At that point, I didn't have my son yet, so for just me and my wife, maybe it wasn't quite as beneficial because we didn't have as intense coordination with children and so on. Even at this point, I think I'm beginning to see more in the future where it's going to be real valuable, especially when the child has more activities. So I think I'm not quite at the point, but I'm going to be soon.
And I should say, I've been using it since
No, I know
January.
you have that, so I just...
So I think
Yeah.
Carmen can, it's only available internally to Microsoft, so Carmen's not allowed to use it right now, but it's been really interesting.
Sometimes these technological things have these sort of unintended side effects that you don't really notice until people are using things for a while.
Yeah.
I was particularly interested when you were talking about the video with the work at home things. I sit in my office and there's a window in my office and anybody can walk by and look and see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But that's very different from having a camera out there because I can see how often people walk by sort of, yes, they can see me, but I can see them kind of thing, as opposed to, just the data aggregation of knowing exactly, what hours I work and stuff like that is something that they can't determine. And I'm wondering, when you're looking at these systems, how you deal with that kind of side effect thing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It would be definitely something you'd want to think about incorporating into a design, how you can have feedback of actually who is seeing you capture these situations. It wasn't something we did in our media space because the media space was set up really to have like a one-on-one communication channel where it's much more difficult to capture and show as feedback as to if there's any secondary users going on in the background. So because it was just a one-on-one system, we didn't have any of those features, but I think you're right, it's something that needs to be addressed in any type of media space situation where you are actually changing the way people can now view you in your space. Yeah?
I have a question about I'm interested in like the mobile scenario.
Yeah.
For example, some family member, can create some event on his mobile phone.
Yeah.
So do you support like we upload it to the Lync system, instantly, or you have to bring it home and synchronize?
So at this point in time, we have not yet developed being able to add events while you're on the mobile phone, but certainly I think you'd want to have it immediately go to your family calendar at home so that if family members are at home, they can instantly see that something was added. Yeah. Yeah?
In the home studies for the Lync trials, did you find it, at what level of interest did you find in the ability to separate informational items versus commitment items? So, hey, there's something going on this day, but we're not actually going to go, or we haven't decided yet, versus, doctor appointment must be a level of commitment.
So in regard to that, what we saw is sometimes family members will have tentative events. They're not really sure, like you're describing. In that case, the most often thing most frequently seen thing was they would somehow annotate the event so it would look different than the rest. Maybe make it a different color. Maybe write just like a T next to it for tentative, maybe start or something. So they would use visual annotations really to know that that was maybe a non-committed event yet.
Yeah, I feel like you didn't have any support. There's no support like built in
So-
for that type of.
In our original design, we did have some features where you could automatically flag something as tentative. It would change the visual appearance. But most family members said, well, if it's tentative, I'll either just not write it on my calendar, or I'll just write it in a different way. So we actually moved to more of supporting their existing practice in that regard.
Did you guys consider using permissions, levels of permissions for the calendar so that the parents had more permissions than the kids? Because if my kids deleted something, I would not want to go back and figure out when it was done and that kind. I mean, that would make me furious.
Yeah.
You know, being the mom.
So we didn't actually do permissions because we thought it would make it much more complicated and not able to just walk up and use it. But you're right, it certainly brings into challenges of, are the kids editing it? Even with a list of changes, you have to then go back and revert. So I think it's maybe an area that still needs to be explored. How do you solve the problem of kids updating the calendar when they're not supposed to? I guess at this point we're really only supporting it, again, through kind of social practice, so maybe placing the calendar in a place that kids can't reach, but maybe still see, or can't reach the stylus to add to it.
Unless they were bigger kids.
Yeah, then bigger kids poses a different challenge, yeah.
Of course, paper calendars don't have permissions, right?
This is true.
But that somehow never seems to come up. Did it come up, or?
Well, if you use yellow stickies, it'd be a problem because they can peel them off. But if you write
Write on
something
it.
down and they have to cross it off, there's evidence of a change.
Yeah, sure, but things are erasable or stickies come off. or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that is interesting that they're not implemented permissions, but they're social permissions, right? That
Exactly, yeah.
clearly heard that from up there. And to throw out an idea, maybe color, like each person gets their own stylus or something like that. Kids at a young age really like that kind of, hey, that's my thing. Now, it doesn't stop, you from using a different stylus, but maybe something like that might be.
Yeah, that's quite true, yeah.
Actually, I had a slightly different question. Which is,
Yeah.
If you had on the email thread project you did, where you tried to organize the email threads.
Yes, yeah.
Was that, I don't know if you can share or not, how was that received by any product teams or any, what kind of feedback did you get about the interest level of actually?
Yeah, so I don't know that I was actually involved in that portion of it, but Gina would probably love to chat with you. Yeah?
For the calendar, on the online port interaction, was there any type of login to that, or how did?
Yeah. So the web version, we had a family login where they used all the same name or family name and password. Yeah.
And that access their particular account.
Yeah, exactly. It would load up their calendar. Yeah.
Yes, the clapping part. Let's do it again.
Thank you.